It begins as many hauntings do, with a sound in the dark. A knock, then another. The insistent tapping of something unseen. Enfield, North London, August 1977. A working-class council house, 284 Green Street. Peggy Hodgson, a single mother of 4 trying to hold life together. But that night, when her children told her the beds were shaking and the chest of drawers slid across the room, ordinary life gave way to something else. The police came. WPC Caroline Heaps would later swear she saw a chair move 4 feet across the floor. No strings, no prank, no explanation. Within days, the world descended on Enfield. Journalists, photographers, ghost hunters. Drawn by whispers of flying Lego bricks and guttural voices from an 11-year-old's mouth. They called it a haunting, a poltergeist. But the story was far more complicated. And like all good ghost stories, it refused to end neatly. Tonight we walk through the fog of fact and folklore, through tape recordings and tabloid headlines, through belief and doubt, into one of the most documented and debated hauntings in modern history. Enfield was not a place where magic happened. Not in 1977, not in the crumbling lattice of post-industrial Britain. Here, ghosts came in the form of unpaid bills, empty cupboards, and nights that stretched too long. This was not a place built for mystery, it was built for survival. 284 Green Street was a council house like thousands of others. Low ceilings, thin walls, a box of bricks assigned to a woman and her 4 children, holding on after the slow collapse of a marriage. Peggy Hodgson endured leaking pipes, a fraying safety net, thin patience, thinner wallpaper. The ghosts in her life had always been real. Bills, illnesses, abandonment. Every day was a calculation, a ration of patience, food, heat. She didn't have time for fantasy or fear. The supernatural wasn't on her lists of concerns. Until it arrived. On the last night of August, something shifted. Not a metaphor, not a feeling, something moved. It began in the bedroom. Janet and Johnny, too young to explain, too old to be comforted, lay awake, watching the darkness breathe. Janet, already prone to daydreams and restless energy, felt a strange mix of fear and elation, as if the world's rules had lifted. Johnny clutched his blanket, hoping silence would return. But Janet, even as she trembled, was drawn in. Awe lit her eyes. The knocking came like a cough from the house itself. Not one sound, but many. Not from above or below, but from everywhere. The floor shivered. The bed rose slightly and settled again. And then, as if pulled by invisible hands, the heavy chest of drawers slid across the floor. Slowly, precisely. Peggy rushed in, ready to scold, but froze when the drawers resisted her grip. They wouldn't budge. Later she said it felt as if the air itself was pushing against her, as if the house had found its voice. That night, just after midnight, she called the police. Not a priest, not a psychic, the police. WPC Caroline Heaps responded. Trained for domestic calls, not this one. She found the family wide-eyed and sleepless. She turned off the lights, asked for quiet. And in that stillness she heard it too. The knock, the tap, the sound of something walking the walls. Then the chair moved, Just a little, then a little more. Heaps later signed a statement. No tricks, no wires, no children in the room, just her, a mother, and the shadows. The next few nights brought strangers, journalists from the Daily Mirror, a photographer, a reporter. They came for a story and left with bruises from flying Lego bricks. One filed nightly stories, another returned with photographs and breathless interviews. The public was transfixed. Letters poured in, some in solidarity, others with skepticism. Local kids lingered outside, hoping to glimpse something. Neighbours whispered in shop queues. Some called it blasphemy, others proof. The spectacle spread through evening papers and 6 o'clock news broadcasts. It made believers, it made skeptics, and it made something in between. Always the chaos centred on Janet. She wasn't scared, at least not as expected. Spirited, restless, sometimes giddy. Impish, one reporter called her. Yet the phenomena, slamming doors, flying objects, disembodied voices, did not feel like childish games. They felt old, deliberate, angry. The question surfaced quickly. Was Janet a vessel or was she performing? When a voice emerged from her throat, deep, coarse, male, it called itself Bill Wilkins. It claimed to have died in that house. Even when Janet's mouth was taped, silenced, the voice continued. The police returned, then researchers, then believers. Morris Gross, still grieving his daughter, arrived not to debunk but to witness. He brought tape recorders, notebooks, and a quiet ache. He watched, he listened, he stayed. Guy Lyon Playfair, a parapsychologist with a writer's pen and a skeptic's patience, joined him. Together they collected evidence. Knocks, photographs, voices, dozens of witnesses. The evidence was strange, inconsistent, as one might expect from something near the fringe of understanding. Hundreds of hours of audio, loud raps, metallic clangs, voices emerging mid-conversation from empty rooms. Photographs of tipping chairs, Janet mid-air, levitation or acrobatics, depending on the eye. Curtains snapping open in still air. Books leaping from shelves. Pillows flung by no visible force. Each piece was peculiar. Together they formed a pattern. A haunting, not behind closed doors but in plain view. Outside, the world began to take sides. Inside, the Hodgson children endured. Their mother said later she never wanted attention, she wanted peace. But peace never came. Because once a house speaks, it does not always stop. And sometimes what answers back is not what you'd hope to find. What began as an isolated disturbance grew teeth. The Enfield house was no longer just a home, it was a stage, and everyone wanted a seat. The reporters came first. Cameras, notebooks, rumours of a girl who spoke with another's voice. They found a kitchen that seemed to breathe, a house that watched back. One headline read, "Spook Kids Terrorise North London." Another, "The House That Hates." Every broken dish, every tossed book became evidence of something more. But as the watchers multiplied, so did the performance. Maurice Gross and Guy Lyon Playfair believed they were chronicling a genuine haunting. They didn't just observe, they moved in. Over months they kept vigil. Tape recorders running, notepads ready. What they recorded was strange. Not just knocks or whispers, phenomena that evaded explanation. Curtains twisting without draft. Cushions tossed across the room. Cabinets opening. A fireplace torn from the wall. And again, that voice. Bill. He cursed, he rambled, he told stories no 11-year-old should know. He claimed he died there. He said he was still there. For Gross it was personal. His daughter had died a year earlier. In the Hodgson home he found, perhaps, an echo. A chance that the veil between worlds wasn't so fixed. He wasn't just collecting data, he was listening for meaning, and maybe for contact. But not everyone saw it the same way. Enter Anita Gregory, another SPR investigator. A psychologist by training, a skeptic by inclination. She visited, observed, and kept her own notes. What she saw didn't speak of spirits, it spoke of theatre. Janet, she said, had trained herself to speak in that voice. The girls performed when the cameras rolled, the chaos faded when the house was empty. To Gregory it was an elaborate game, and that was the deeper tension. The haunting may have begun in private, but it survived in public. By now, Enfield was more than a location, it was a phenomenon. And the question shifted from, is this real, to why do we need it to be? Whatever the answer, the haunting was no longer just in the Hodgson's walls. It had taken root in newspapers, radio, whispered retellings. And with every retelling it grew. To hear the voice was to feel something ancient pass through modern wires. A rasping male tone, harsh and phlegmy, emerging from a child's throat. Low, guttural, confident. My name is Bill Wilkins. I lived here before. I died in this chair. An impossible sound. Unnatural in pitch and posture. Yet recorded, replayed, tested. Gross and Playfair ran experiments that straddled science and seance, taping Janet's mouth, filling it with water, isolating her. The voice still came. To them it wasn't mimicry. The voice had vocal tics, glottal stops, a depth not easily explained. Playfair believed normal vocal cords couldn't produce it. To him, it was an intrusion. Something using Janet as its vessel. But the haunting was never clean, it left fingerprints of doubt. At times Janet admitted to messing about. She claimed only 2% was faked. Skeptics believed it was more. And so the case became a battleground of voices, some literal and others metaphorical. Skeptics lined up. Magicians, psychologists, investigators, each dismissing it as trickery, delusion, sleight of hand. But if it was a trick, it was a masterful one. Across nearly 200 hours of tape, the investigators captured things no stage magician could easily replicate. Raps that answered questions, objects flying on cue, levitations, unverified but attested by witnesses. The house became an acoustic archive, a memory machine. Every knock, every curse, every sigh stored in the tape hiss. Still, none of it proved a ghost, only that something had happened, and it had happened in front of many. Witnesses included tradesmen, reporters, police. Perception is not proof, especially when fear colours the eye, especially in the half-light of a suburban room. So what then is the voice? A ghost clinging to an old space? A child speaking when no one dared? A projection of grief and trauma of a nation straining under its own unease? In the 1970s, Britain was fraying. Garbage strikes, blackouts, a rising sense of decay coloured the national mood. In Enfield, that unease seeped through the walls. The headlines were filled with things just as unbelievable as a haunted child, and maybe that's why people listened. It wasn't just about a girl or a ghost, it was about what happens when the cracks in a house mirror the cracks in culture. And through those cracks, something unspeakable finds a way to speak. By late 1978, the noise began to fade. The knocks became less frequent, the voices fell silent. The investigators packed up their tape decks and went home. But what happens to a house when the haunting ends? For the Hodgson family, life didn't return to normal because there was no normal to return to. The children had been watched, interrogated, celebrated and mocked. Janet became known as the Ghost Girl. At school she was teased, in public pointed at. Peggy Hodgson tried to protect what remained of her family's privacy. She cooperated but never invited attention. She didn't want fame, she wanted answers. In the end, she was left with questions. Decades later, Janet admitted to using a Ouija board before it began in a moment of boredom. She confessed to faking some phenomena, just enough, she said, to keep researchers interested. To skeptics, that was a confession. To believers, a red herring. Why fake 2% if 98% was real? Gross remained convinced until his death. Playfair too. They believed not in every detail but in the weight of the whole. The voices, the photos, the witnesses, the way the house felt late at night when no one was sure why. To this day, no definitive explanation has emerged. No wires, no trick doors, no conclusion to wrap it up. And maybe that's why Enfield endures. Not because it proved the supernatural, but because it refuses to resolve. In time, the case became myth. Retold in films, documentaries and stage plays. The Conjuring 2 brought it to Hollywood. The Enfield haunting brought it to British TV. Ghost tours followed. The address became a modern ruin, not broken but marked. And beneath all the retellings, the tapes remain. Boxes of them. Crackling voices, knocks in the dark. Evidence, illusion, or both. Perhaps the most unsettling hauntings aren't the ones that scream for attention, but the ones that whisper just enough to make us question. Enfield didn't give us closure, it gave us echoes, and sometimes when the night is still enough, those echoes return. What do we carry forward from Enfield, though? Whether the Hodgsons were haunted by spirits or by grief, adolescence and the camera's gaze, the Enfield case doesn't offer answers, only attention. Images that won't resolve. Questions that refuse to leave. You've been listening to Noir Frequency. To help keep these stories alive, there are a few small things you can do. Like the episode, share it with someone who might need it, subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever it is you're listening. These small gestures ripple out, helping more people find the show. In a sea of content, your support is the signal that cuts through the noise. If you'd like to go deeper, you can join us over at patreon.com/noirfrequency. Patrons get early access, bonus content, and an ad-free feed, because some signals are meant to come through clear. For those who want to carry the story out into the world, visit noirfrequency.com. In the store's a collection of t-shirts I've designed. Simple, evocative, and meant to keep the signal close. Wear one if it speaks to you. Whether you're here for the folklore, the questions, or the quiet company of strange stories, this space is for you. Thanks for being here.